Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Enhancing Simulation-Based Learning with Gamification presentation.
Welcome to our presentation today. My name is Yohanatan Tamir from Tipping Point Media, and alongside me is Todd Lewis from Merz.
The objective of this presentation is to go through these three things. Discussing the key elements of gamification, that's going through all the pieces and making sure that we have an understanding of what is the basis that we're going to be talking about. Then we're going to be discussing serious games and how the elements of those serious games can be used to leverage into simulation-based training, similar to how we take information from one subject and bring it into another and transforming it into our own. And the last thing is explaining how the elements of gamification can be created in an effective learning solution. And we'll use the Merz product as an example and discuss the process of how we got into it all. So now let's break down gamification and its key elements and discuss how useful these elements can be. Gamification. What is gamification? Gamification is the application of gameplay elements into another type of activity. So what does this mean? You're taking the traditional elements of games and you're going to bring them into different aspects of life, therefore gamifying them. Now, what are those gamification elements that you should bring in? The most traditional ones and are considered the gamification pillars are badges, leaderboards, timers, points and percentages, and interactions. What we're going to do in this presentation is go through them in this section and explain to you how they can work. Badges are a great way to show someone's hard work. Now, badges can be considered certifications of kinds or things in that nature, but for games, badges are usually used if somebody's completed a challenge or completed a mission as a status symbol. We can use that type of information in our simulations to include badges in that way, where if they complete a certain section or complete a certain learning goal, you give them a badge that they can show off in their screen or to other people. Leaderboards are a great way to create traditional competition while learning. Now, while you have leaderboards that will show off your score or what you were able to accomplish, it's also able to motivate competition. So if you're at the lower end of the scoreboard, you can not only see, oh, I need some place to improve, but you also know where you want to get to be in the top part of the leaderboard. Now, this competition can be really helpful, but not if it's used as your primary objective. You want learning to still be what's important, not being first place in a leaderboard. It's a great social element as well as creating a sense of competition in an app or process that might be a little dry. Timers are a great way to create a sense of agency. Now, what does that mean? Agency means that you're trying to get people to do these interactions at a reasonable amount of time to what they'd be correctly in the simulation. So you don't want somebody to take their time and pretty much go through things slowly. That's what you'd have like a learn mode for. But when you're doing a hardcore simulation of an element, you don't want people to think, oh, I can take my time with it. Well, in reality, when they'd be actually in the situation, you'd want them to feel exactly how much time they have, what is the next step that they need to think about. So timers allow you to have that sense of agency as well as creating a safe to fail environment. Because while failing isn't great, at least they're doing this in a simulation instead of doing it in real life. So keep that in mind when using timers, that you're actually creating a sense of urgency and agency that they need to complete a task at a certain time, and use that as a reference to what you'd have in your actual world. Points and percentages are great ways to show people feedback as well as progress and how they're doing. So if you think about points, if you get a lot of points, you'd feel good. You feel rewarded for the hard work and practice. If you get a low amount of points, you want to try harder and you're getting reinforced to learn and practice more. It's a simple way of feedback, but it also can tell you how much longer you have. Percentages can show you how far you've gone along with it, how you're scoring compared to other people. And that's when we start talking about combining some of these elements. We talked about leaderboards and how they show your points and they show your times and things of that nature. Now, percentages and points are how you actually are getting those. You're wanting to look at things that mean the most to you when you're assigning points to them. And you're also wanting to show percentages that actually are accurate to what they worked on. If they only got one question wrong, you don't want it to be a 50% unless that question is the most important thing. So keep in mind when you're choosing these points and percentages what their true value is to real world simulations. Interactions. So we've talked a lot now about the elements that you're putting in, but now we have to think about how they're going to put in their information. Interactions is the easiest and best way to do it. You have them interacting with the information live so that they're always feeling like they're constantly learning, but they're also teaching themselves how to do it. Now, doing these interactions instantly gives the user a sense of ownership. Everything that I'm doing has a one-for-one effect with the objects or elements. So you don't want to create any interactions that are mundane or feel like they're not actually providing anything to the user. You want these interactions to be meaningful, something that either gives more information or gives hands-on practice. Now, that sense of ownership is going to be something that we talk about a little bit throughout all of these, and it's really important to keep that in mind because it gives you that sense of intent of what the user is learning and how far they've come along. Now we move on to retention. Now, retention has multiple definitions, and for this one, we're going to need to focus on both the game definition and the learning definition. So we have a few quotes on here of what constitutes the game definition versus the learning definition. Now, both of these are great, and to keep in mind, I'm going to read them out loud just so that we can break them down a little bit. A measure of how many people are still playing your game after a certain period of time. So what does that mean? It means that you want people to use this frequently and for a while. So you don't want to create a simulation that somebody uses once, thinks they have it nailed, and then goes on into the world without looking ever at it again. That's great. It means they've learned the process, but it also means your application did just enough where they didn't want to come back to it to even refresh their memory. They think your application is so mundane, so boring that they'd rather say they've done it once, get the approval, and move on. Now, what you want to do is create an application that gives a lot of information, creates a lot of interaction that people would want to use and revise and think about so that they're always going back to it and learning from it every time they go into it. The next definition, the learning definition, the process of transferring new information into long-term memory. Now, what does that mean? You want the information to not only be there from when they're using it, but to stick in their memory. Now, some of the best ways of doing that is actually using hands-on learning. So what do you want to do is combine it. Gamification uses both the learning definition to show a success that you've learned the information and you've gotten through it, and use the game definition so that you know people are going back to it. You don't want it to be a one-and-done deal that they've done it, they've learned, they don't go back to it again because they didn't want to do it again. You want it to be an open and safe environment for people to want to come back to. Now that we've broken down the elements of gamification, let's now go into serious games and simulations and see how those have affected the way that we use in our software and how we were able to enhance our retention with these tools. The first thing we need to do is break down what is a serious game versus a normal game. So what is a normal game? An activity engaged in for diversion or amusement. Pretty simple. It's what it is. It's a game. It's meant for entertainment. It's meant for people to enjoy but not really think too hard of. It's more to be engaging than to be informative. What is a serious game? Any piece of software that merges a non-entertaining purpose, serious, with a video game structure, game. Now, that makes sense, but let's take that a step further. It's not only that you're creating a piece of software that's not for not entertaining, but not fully entertaining. You're trying to focus on this as a way of teaching something more than to be entertaining, while putting it into a video game structure, putting it into an app, putting it into a piece of AR or VR technology. So the key points are your intent. Your intent is to educate, and that makes it a serious game, to inform a user. It's not to entertain. It's not to have a lighthearted fun of a subject, even though that may come with it, it's more to make people knowledgeable about the information they're about to take into the real world. The first simulation / serious game we're going to talk about is the Microsoft Flight Simulator. So, you know the developers, it's Microsoft right there in the title. But what was the point of this? One, it was to allow people to see lots of parts of the world, allow them to fly a plane. But what is the point of flying a plane? One, it was used as an educational tool for younger people. So if they were interested in flying or becoming pilots, it was a great way to do it in a safe environment without any passengers are going into a flight school or anything of that nature. But the other reason that this is interesting is that it gives the person decision-making choices. How they want to fly, what planes they want to fly. Those are great, but landing the plane, what are the steps they're going to take for that? What are the steps they're going to take when taking off? Are they going to do all the correct flight procedures? And that brings us to a sense of ownership through that interaction. That interaction is constantly making decisions to make sure you're flying this plane properly. Now, what does this do? It doesn't give you an experience of exactly what a pilot goes through. That would take many, many years, but it gives you a snippet, a bookends version of it. So you're getting a little bit of information about it, as well as realizing the experiences they take into doing this. The next simulation / serious game we're going to be reviewing is Duolingo. Duolingo is a popular app that teaches people various languages through quizzes and mini games. Now, there are certain elements of this, like timers, choice making, points, quizzes. They really have the whole gambit of gamification tools to create language learning into a fun, active activity. But what are the elements that they use that are really important? The first one, as we discussed with the last one, is decision making. You're creating interactions and ownership over everything. If you get a question wrong, you know you're the reason why. It's not the software or the tools. It is your decisions that create a sense of ownership of your learning. The next is leaderboards and league levels. You want to get to the top of that league so you feel like you know the most about the language. You feel like your hard work and practice in that language makes you feel the best at it. And they give you badges along the way. Those badges are used as your progression tool, as well as a way for you to see how much left you have to learn. And the last thing is points. As you go through all these activities, you're accumulating points, which go towards your badges and your leaderboard scored. So if you're looking at things in this presentation, look at these points that they're doing. Now, what are the takeaways we can get from this? They want people to learn languages in a variety of ways, and they want that activities to also be various. So they use a lot of these. Now, for your personal work, you don't need to use all these different things to create an activity. You just need to use the ones that are most important so that you're focusing that gamification into learning, not making learning into a game. Spend is the final simulation and serious game we'll be discussing in this section. It was created by the Urban Ministry of Durham to discuss the impoverished population and the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis. Why I wanted to bring this up today is because not only is this a very difficult decision-making experience, but it gives you the most ownership of your decisions. You know that every decision you make will have a consequence, and in turn, that consequence will result in losing points, which is money, or gaining them. Now, gaining money might be something that can detriment your own health. In one of the decisions, you choose to either stay home while sick or go into work. You can get fired if you're sick at work, or you can get fired if you stay home. You just have to figure out what is the best decision in that scenario. As you can see, you can run out of money within 18 days in this experience. Now, that might seem like not many, but that might be a pretty good run-through of this experience. It shows you that the decisions that somebody in that position are extremely difficult and can cause a bunch of different issues in their day-to-day life. Now, what are the takeaways we can take from this? It brings articles that discuss poverty and statistics of living to life. It's not just something you read about, but something you're now experiencing. And the second thing that we can take away is the people at Durham wanted to create a safe to fail environment. Failing in the real world would result in being poor, not being able to sustain for yourself and your family. But at least in this situation, it's all within a gamified environment. So you're able to fail without feeling too bad about it. But it does give you the understanding of what people in that situation are going through. So, what are the main takeaways we can get from all of this? Enforcing decision making is one of them, making sure that all decisions that go through the application are ones that give a sense of ownership and allowing people to feel like they have a real impact of what's going on. The next is creating a true to life scenario. You don't want anything that's absurd or ridiculous to the point where people aren't taking it seriously, but you do want things that are entertaining to a point that they don't get bored and just are clicking next or running through the procedure so they can say, oh, I've done it, I'm over all of it. So you want to create something real to life, but entertaining enough where it keeps people in. Now, the last thing you want to do is add feedback. Adding feedback allows people to feel like what they're doing actually has a sense of real world. Because if you're doing a procedure in the real world, you're going to be able to go through something and realize, oh, I've finished this section, going on to the next one, and I'm able to do things and it has a real life impact. Virtually, things are going to be a little bit more stagnant, but while you're gamifying things, it's better than having just a flat PDF that you're reading through and you can't really tell if you got something right or wrong because you've read it a couple of times and you feel like you've gotten the information, but you can't really put that to the test until you get tested. At least with the gamified applications, you actually can do that. You can go through, you can get tested, you can get things right or wrong, you can understand the content, you can get feedback describing exactly what you did wrong and how you can improve next time around. How can this be applied? So we've created a few simulations, one including the Merz, one that we'll go over the full process in a little bit. But Tipping Point Media has created the escape room and sales simulator. This is something you may have seen before from us, but why I wanted to bring them up again is to review what we did gamifying them. Escape Room was actually taking content that would be found in a PDF and creating a full immersive experience. Not only does the game itself teach you things, but you're constantly being quizzed and trying to earn a high enough score and leaderboard. Now, the sales simulator actually goes through scenarios and allows you to feel what it's like in the real world with a safe to fail environment, but also allows you to think about how you would respond to things. Now, we give the cookie cutter answers that we were informed with, but you might have a little bit more improvised answers, things that you don't usually get asked. But this allows you to think on your feet and move through the process step by step.
Hi, my name is Todd Lewis. I'm the Director of Sales Enablement for Merz Aesthetics out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And over the next course of slides, we are going to walk through the gamification in a learning solution and what we partnered with Tipping Point Media to accomplish. When we audited our sales reps' ability to provide coaching with the products, we realized that despite having a very comprehensive live training program, there was nothing but static material to aid in recall and to help them as they were in the field. So what we did was we partnered with Tipping Point Media to help increase this knowledge retention by creating a live injection testing app. I challenged Tipping Point Media to come up with a solution where we could train over 120 people at the same time and test their retention over and over again. And the goal was to test their aptitude in over-the-shoulder coaching. So what Tipping Point Media did, was that they repurposed the supplemental guide that we use as their field guide and turned it into a testing app. This project entailed working across many different departments because we needed to make sure that we could accurately describe when to use the simulation to explain the procedural steps. We also needed to explain the process involved so they could design an accurate, engaging simulation. And then finally, we worked together to identify the challenges associated with creating such an engaging simulation. After collaborating with medical, regulatory, legal, and clinical, Tipping Point Media and myself came up with the solution with this interactive simulation. This gamified simulation-based training tool is going to offer consistency in language, terminology, and best practices for our most important asset, our field representatives. The simulation is reinforced by providing engaging, realistic instruction, allowing the users to practice the procedure with a goal at any time, and also providing real-time feedback so they can self-correct before they go in to talk to an office.
We wanted to make sure that this was able for everyone to use, so we wanted it to be on an iPhone and iPad so that you're able to interact and look through things right as you're going into an office or right before. We also wanted you to be able to interact with things that you aren't able to see naturally. You want to see the arteries, the musculature, the nerve systems, so you know what you're going to interact with and what you're going to be discussing when looking at specific procedures. This made us want to use the iPad because it has a wide variety of capabilities and was able to store a lot of memory, which this app had.
Merz partnered with Tipping Point Media to create a simulation app designed to test sales reps on their skills and knowledge pertaining to cosmetic injection procedures. This app allows for the support of additional sales reps without the need for additional trainers as well. Before the practice procedure, reps select a product and one of the many patient cases to review. Next, reps are encouraged to review key points of anatomy, including skin layers, bone structure, and face musculature. Reps begin their practice procedure by creating drawings to mark injection locations on the patient. Next, the app walks reps through the process of preparing the injection solution for the product they chose. Then, reps are tested on their injection techniques and knowledge of the procedure based on the product they chose. Depending on the product and patient choice, reps will have the opportunity to test a wide variety of techniques and best practices for an expanding line of products, indications, and patient cases. Finally, the app generates an accuracy score based on predefined criteria and coaches reps where they performed steps incorrectly.
There were several unique design challenges in putting this thing together. First of all, and most importantly, the scalability and ease of access, right? We wanted to make sure it was used and able to expand as our portfolio expands. The other challenge we only had static models, so Tipping Point Media had to create these 3D images for varied audiences and use cases. And then, of course, seat time, right? We wanted to make sure that the reps were able to use this, but it didn't take up all day long. This is a testing app after all.
You're right, and it was a testing app throughout the whole design process. So we wanted to make sure that when we were scaling, everything that we created had the ability to keep moving forward. So we weren't creating one face with one set of wrinkles, we created a variety of faces, all of which were using one base model. As well as using your static models, we were able to animate, operate, and show how these wrinkles affect the movement of the face. And with the varied audience, we needed to make sure that it was simple enough where everyone could understand it, but thorough enough where the testing process wasn't handing it over to the reps. We wanted to make sure that as we were going through this, everyone was challenged, but also learning through that challenge.
One of the most exciting things about this testing application are its design elements. The simulation consists of 3D interactive environments, several different injection procedure tools, simulation of various face markings and injection depths, and finally, simulations of the various interfaces that would be used in close to 8 different procedures. It really is a phenomenal undertaking.
Not only was this undertaking incredibly interesting for our team and as well as the Merz team, we wanted to make sure that they were accurate. So each one of the design elements needed to not only be functional and usable / entertaining, but it needed to show what it would be really like to be in that space. On the right, you have an early example of what we were testing through, and we realized that it wasn't going to work. It didn't block off the wrinkles well enough. It didn't test somebody well enough to be looking for said wrinkles. So we needed to move on from that, and that's where the design elements came into play. They needed to wrap around what already exists in the real world and enhance it so somebody can learn from it.
It's one thing to read, it's one thing to see, and it's another thing to do. And the gamified design elements actually make this an exciting tool for the reps to use. We have amazing elements like timers, points, and of course the instant feedback and coaching, which helps them get better and improve their skills.
As we discussed earlier in this presentation, gamification should be used with care. So we didn't want to add in all of the pillars. We didn't think that was necessary for this. We wanted to add in the specific ones we thought would work best. So we wanted timers to make the injections feel real. They wanted them to be as fast and as accurate as somebody who would be doing this in real life. We added points as a sense of showing ownership, but also rewarding someone for doing well. And we added instant feedback as the coaching so that we knew exactly what they did wrong and how we could help them. Now, if we were to add percentages, leaderboards, that would add a sense of competition that we don't need at this moment. We want them to learn. We don't want them to compete with one another just yet. If we decided in the future that who can do this procedure best, or what was the element that everybody succeeded on the most, that's when a leaderboard would be useful not only for them, but for ourselves.
As I mentioned earlier, collaboration was a huge part of this project and helped it get off the ground. Without the work of medical, legal, clinical, and our field representatives, we never would have been able to build an app like this. This testing app is going to help with our sales reps' aptitude, confidence, and consistency when they're dealing with their HCPs. Ultimately, patients are going to benefit from this app because the more confidence that the healthcare professionals have in our reps and in their training, the better providers they're going to be. So far, this application has received such great feedback from the field and from their managers. This testing application fills a critical need in our team's ability to discuss the application of our products in their practice. It also provides our representatives with another resource they could use to improve confidence and credibility with HCPs. That comes from a regional director. Not only are we getting positive feedback, but we're looking at some really great measurements as well. Number one being a cost savings, right? We can have the ability to test our representatives at any time and get real world feedback. We also were able to do some more trainings around COVID-19 lockdown, right? We're able to test these folks virtually, and they have easy access to this via their iPads.
And our team was really excited about this positive feedback. We wanted to make sure that everything that you would be able to do in person on a physical test or a dummy, we were able to also do virtually. We know that in this time where COVID-19 is still going around, we wanted to make sure that you were able to still connect with one another. Now, using Zoom or Teams or anything of that nature allowed you to interact and still test and question one another on how things work. So we were excited to allow you not only to use the iPad, but talk with one another. On the right, you see a campus system that we developed to make sure that tracking was also an option. We wanted to make sure that if you were wanting to track the progress of your participants, you can look at the general statistics, maybe see where we can improve the app or see where the information wasn't taught well enough prior to the app. And then from there, see how the results change as the instruction changes.
Looking forward, we definitely can leverage our existing assets for some new and exciting technology that's on the forefront, like augmented reality and virtual reality. We can definitely add content to this with future indications, maybe a device modification, and of course, we can partner with our global teams to add different languages. It truly is a scalable project, and we're very happy that we launched it.
And we wanted on our end to make sure that scalability was used very quickly. So if you wanted to bring that product to another location of the body, we'd have that ready. Or if you wanted to use it on a different head, that would also be ready. Or if you wanted to switch out the product, that could also be done. We wanted every rule or change to be able to be programmed in from the beginning so that in the future, if their team came back to us, we were able to say, great, this is how long it will take, and this is when we're going to give it to you by.
On behalf of myself and Todd, we just wanted to say thank you so much for stopping by, and we hope that this session was informative. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, as well as visit us at booth 9 or email at info@tipmedia.com. Thank you so much. For those of you interested in where we found our sources, as well as where we compiled a lot of this information, this is our bibliography, and let us know if you want any specific references that we were able to provide.
Please also send messages in the comments, and I'll be sure to respond as soon as possible. We look forward to talking with everyone, and we can't wait to see how things progress.